Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is now on PC. Hello everybody, I am Jmulls of Jmulls Gaming, and let's mull over the PC port for Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, but also the state of Square Enix and Final Fantasy on PC and where I think it'll go in the future. Let's start off with the game. The game has been running very well for me, but I'm on a really high-end PC with a 4080 Super and a 14900. You would hope it would run well for me. I haven't noticed any noticeable frame drops, anything like that, but getting the chance to dive back into Rebirth just solidifies how much I love this game. It was one of my 2 Game of the Years for 2024, right alongside Metaphor v Fantasio. I absolutely adored Rebirth, despite its issues, and I think Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is one of the best games Square Enix has put out in a long time, but it is absolutely a polarizing game, and it's a game where you'll either really love it or hate it. You know, the definition of polarizing. In a lot of ways, it is the exact direction that I hoped they would go after Remake. Because Remake, well, remade the Midgar portion of the original FF7 game. It was hyperlinear, and there wasn't too much in the way of side content. There was some, just it felt really restricted in a lot of ways. That is not the case when it comes to Rebirth. It is big, bold, bombastic, and filled to the brim with content, and specifically side content. There is a lot, and there's a lot of minigames in Rebirth, and a lot of sections that, again, you'll either love them or you'll hate them. And that kind of is the way it is with a lot of these side minigames you can find in Rebirth. Stuff like Fort Condor, or stuff like Queen's Blood, Dolphin Riding, 3D Fighter. There's a lot of minigames in this game, and I think for the most part, I do really enjoy them. And I think what the PC port of Rebirth benefits from are the updates that came out after the initial release on the PS5. The most notable one for me was the change they made to the Ubisoft exploration towers you can find in the open world to reveal more activities to do in the open zones. Previously, you had to climb these things, and it was just a massive slog of watching animations of you climbing stuff or ladders, and it took forever, it was annoying, and just felt as if they were trying to pad the timeout. And at some point after release, they must have done an update, because now, to activate these towers, it's just at the base of it. You don't have to climb it anymore, at least the ones I've explored, and oh my god, is it infinitely better now. You may not realize it if you haven't played the original version of Rebirth on the PS5, but not having to climb those towers, I breathe a sigh of relief every time I see one of those things. But there's a bunch of little moments throughout Rebirth, and specifically in the open world, where they kind of pad the timeout with meaningless animations that don't really need to exist. A lot of moments where you do an activity and then you have to stop, look down on your little phone-like device, and then yap to Chadley, or more specifically, have Chadley yap to you. Some people won't mind stuff like that. For others, it'll be a constant annoyance, and you'll just groan every time it happens. I kind of fall in the latter there. I think it happens far too much. I think an easy way to fix this would be to either, 1, call the dialogue a lot, or, whenever scenes like that happen with Chadley, let me be on the move and just pop up a little, window in the corner of the screen or something to show me Chadley's face, or Mai's face whenever they want to talk. But let me move around the map while this stuff is happening. I think that'd be way less intrusive and way just better. Now though, what I really want to talk about, because oh my god, this game is gorgeous. I always thought Rebirth was a very pretty game, but I played it originally on the PS5 in performance mode because I value FPS. I value frame rate. But when the game initially came out and when I played it, the performance mode then made the game look as if you smeared Vaseline all across the camera. It was very blurry, and presentation in some locations left a bit to be desired. Still overall a gorgeous game, don't get me wrong, it just, you always knew it could be better. And on PC, good god, this game looks crisp and gorgeous, and the changes they made to the lighting, beautiful, dude. Everywhere I look in this game, I'm just basking in how gorgeous this game looks. I am an unabashed Final Fantasy VII fan. So while not a lot of people may care about doing stuff like that and going slow and stopping to smell the roses and just gazing out at the vistas here, I love FF7. It's always been one of my favorite JRPGs. I love Remake, and I absolutely adore Rebirth. And just how gorgeous this game looks on PC, love it. Especially the June neon zone with the lighting. Oh god, dude, it's so pretty. Now, having said that, we need to talk about the actual PC port a bit here. There's a few interesting things they've done, and by interesting I mean things that make me scratch my head, and stuff that feels like Square Enix for some reason is still in a learning stage when it comes to PC. Historically speaking, Square Enix was never known as a company that did good PC ports. I think Rebirth, at least in my experience, has been rather good. I had a few stutters near the beginning of the game, but they've largely died off or I've stopped noticing them. The game runs well for me, it's gorgeous, but why are we capping the frame rate at 120? Like, why are we doing that? Especially when a mod can uncap it, and that mod is already out there. Like, I've seen Blitz's video showing off mods that add in stuff like FSR or frame gen or uncapping the frame rate, or heck, even ultra wide. It's one of those situations where the reasoning doesn't matter because the public perception of this, I wouldn't say is necessarily bad, but is head scratching. Why can modding implement this stuff within like a day, if that? Why didn't the game ship with this stuff? When it comes to stuff like FSR and that kind of content, maybe there's some legal reason they couldn't implement it themselves. I kind of doubt it, but like maybe that's the case. But it comes off as weirdly incompetent that modding can implement this stuff so quickly after release, but the game didn't ship with this stuff. It comes off as lazy more than anything, even if the port itself is fine. Rebirth was always an intensive game, hence why it looked kinda suspect on the PS5 in performance mode. But if you have the power, the game runs rather well, at least in my experience, and the game plays beautifully. It's just a weird thing about the PC port when it comes to that stuff, and I doubt most people will notice, because for like 99.9% of the player base, 120 FPS is fine. I'm on like max graphics, I rarely dip below 100 FPS, at least that I notice. Most of the time I'm hovering way close to 120. It's just a weird exception that doesn't feel as if it needs to be there. But, moving on from that, this game plays remarkably well. I just wrapped up a playthrough of Remake right before the Rebirth PC port, and going from Remake to Rebirth, good god, the combat really stands out in Rebirth. It's so much faster and more fluid. The changes they made going from Remake to Rebirth, like giving everyone a parry, feels way easier to actually get to an enemy to fight it than in Remake. You feel faster, you can kind of dash farther while in combat to get to an enemy. It just has a really good pace to it. And then synergy skills and synergy abilities, being able to pair various party members together for different effects and attacks and stuff like that. What a phenomenal addition to Rebirth. And there's another element that I noticed in my replay through of Remake, but I'm also noticing here in Rebirth, specifically in the QTE sections. In the open world, when you go to the shrines of the big summons you're trying to collect throughout the zones, and those little altars you can find throughout the world, the game feels far more responsive for me here than it did on the PlayStation. Those QTEs, when I hit my button, it registers my input, at least it feels like to me, way quicker than it did on PlayStation. And I don't think I noticed it then while I was playing on PlayStation because I had just grown accustomed to it, and it became muscle memory to account for the innate delay there. And I always found myself, at least recently on Rebirth and even in Remake, when I was doing QTEs, I'd press a button normally when I would on the PlayStation version, but it registered it way quicker. And it threw my timing off for a lot of stuff. And I don't know if that's because of the PC port itself or because I'm using an Xbox controller instead of a DualSense like I was on the PS5, but the game feels so responsive to me. And I just feel myself falling in love with Rebirth all over again. Not only has the PC port been a very good experience for me, it also has a ton of potential in the future because of the modding scene. That replay through a Remake I did before Rebirth came out, I did that version on PC, and I modded the hell out of it. I had Barret as Master Chief, Tifa as Pyra, I had a swole version of Aerith as well. It was just funny. And there's a quote that's been making the rounds recently from Hamaguchi talking about modding and how he even uses mods when it comes to PC games sometimes, and that he likes them. I cannot find the source for that quote to save my life, but I keep seeing it going around. And I think there is something to be said for the modding of, say, Remake, but also Rebirth, because it adds just a little bit of longevity and gives you, the player, the ability to, well, modify the game. So when I eventually come back to revisit this game in the future, possibly even on hard mode, by then, we'll probably get some cool mods that I can play around with. It's one of the reasons I like playing on PC nowadays, is just having the option to be able to do stuff like that. The only other, like, criticism I could possibly level at Rebirth, right now at least, is I don't know if it's intended or if it's a bug or something, but sometimes when I skip dialogue, namely in some, like, side quests and stuff like that, it doesn't actually skip the dialogue, it just removes the subtitles and I have to wait for the animations and even the entire line of dialogue to be voiced and then it moves on. It's a bit weird because sometimes it will just skip that line of dialogue, but sometimes it won't. Not a big thing for me, just, again, I don't know if that's intended or not. But yeah, I've been loving Rebirth again. It's been so fun. The combat feels just as good as it always has, if not even a little bit better, and it's just a really dang good game. Now let's talk about numbers. Some people being rather negative at the performance numbers on Steam for Rebirth. I did not share that pessimism myself. Using SteamDB, you can look up all these numbers for yourself, but at the time of recording, the all-time peak for Final Fantasy VII Rebirth was 40,564 concurrent players. That doesn't mean how many copies were sold, just the highest number of people playing Rebirth at one time on Steam. And checking the other single-player Final Fantasy games that are on Steam, at least 16, Remake, Integrate, and 15, Rebirth is the best performing one there. 16 peaked at 27,508, Final Fantasy 15 Windows Edition peaked at 29,498, and Final Fantasy VII Remake Integrate peaked at 13,803, though do note that was originally an Epic Game Store exclusive, and at least I don't have those numbers, but while comparing Steam numbers isn't exactly a science, it can give you a general idea of what's going on. And while yes, I agree, I think Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is one of the best games of the last few years. Yes, I agree. But I've talked about this before, namely on stream. I never expected Rebirth on Steam to do like Elden Ring or Baldur's Gate 3 levels of numbers. And I always thought that notion that it was going to or should was a bit silly. Square Enix over the last decade, if not more, and maybe that's even being generous, has been weirdly inconsistent when it comes to PC and when it comes to multi-platform releases. 15 originally came out on the Xbox One and the PS4, then later came out on PC. 16 and 7 Remake and 7 Rebirth were PlayStation exclusives, but Remake came out on the PS4 while Rebirth and 16 came out on the PS5. And then when Remake was originally ported to PC, it was an Epic Game Store exclusive, before eventually coming over to Steam. And while I love all of these Final Fantasy games that I just talked about, a lot of them play very differently to one another, let alone to the Final Fantasy games of old. And I don't think Square Enix have put themselves in a position over the last decade, if not more, for insane numbers on PC yet. I think they're trending in the right direction, and I don't want this to come off as pessimistic for the future of Square Enix of Final Fantasy, but you have to contextualize these numbers. It is hard to develop a giant fan base for an IP when an IP releases on inconsistent platforms, has a love-hate relationship with exclusivity, and then also changes up the gameplay significantly going from one entry to the other. Even going from Remake to Rebirth, the game goes from like a linear corridor experience in Remake, because that's the intended idea for Remake since it was the Midgar portion, to an open world adventure with Rebirth. Final Fantasy has lacked in terms of consistency over the last long while, but I think what they're starting to do now, or at least indicating, is going in a better direction. I think the formula in Rebirth is really solid, and if the giant open world Final Fantasy games going forward have this formula, I think this is a winning formula. This combat system is incredible. It's party-based, it's a blend between old and new, with the ATB system, with time drastically slowing down as you're picking what command you want to utilize. It is really fun combat. The game itself is gorgeous. If Final Fantasy has to have an identity, if they double down on Rebirths, I think that is a winning one. But they've also been talking about, and they can't shut up about this, they want to go multi-platform from here on out. That is another plus for me. Final Fantasy used to be an IP that could thrive as an exclusive. Not anymore. Not with the amount of experimentation they've had, and I don't mind that experimentation. It's part of the charm I have for Final Fantasy. But it's better suited to be third-party and to be multi-platform now. Plus, I don't like exclusivity as a concept anyways. They might be a little screwed when it comes to part 3 of the remake trilogy because there might be a pre-existing deal for exclusivity for that game for PlayStation anyways. If Square Enix could get out from under that, or if that deal never existed, I think that would be beneficial if the game could come to PC day one next time. Because again, let's face it, people en masse are driven by hype. And when a game first comes out, that's when hype is ripest. You can still garner hype down the line, but it's ripest and easily exploitable when you first come out. And with the PC versions of 16 and Rebirth coming out so long after these games initially came out, hype dies down. And I think it's impressive that in spite of all of those elements, Rebirth is still doing the best of the recent single-player Final Fantasy games on Steam. I don't view it to be a failure, I view it as a trend that, hey, Square Enix, pay attention, there is potential here. This is a phenomenal game. I think it's legitimately one of the best games they ever put out. Is it perfect? No. Are there things to improve? Yes. Is it incredible and amazing in spite of all those problems? Absolutely. And is this a winning formula? In my eyes, yes. And yeah, I think with that, I'll call the video there for the day. Rebirth is awesome. If you are interested in it, I would recommend checking it out, especially if you already liked Remake. I love the world, I love the characters, I love the activities you do in it. The music is so dang good as well. And the game is gorgeous. With that, I'll call the video there for the day. Thank you all for tuning in. My pleasure making the video. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like and subscribe. It really helps the channel out and helps support future content, and I greatly appreciate it. Stay safe, have a great day. Leave a comment down below with your thoughts, your opinions on the PC port for Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Have you been enjoying it? Are you looking into it? Are you hesitant? Let me know. I'd love to hear your thoughts, hear your opinions, and hear your perspectives. Stay safe, have a great day. Go play some video games, and I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye, everybody. Until we meet again.